In this video, I'll share with you 7 tips that literally anyone can apply to improve your time at your next parkrun. Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new, my name is Chris and I'm an amateur triathlete based in North Devon. Now, everyone wants to be able to run a faster parkrun, and so in this video I have several tips for you that I've personally used to set new PBs and even go sub 19 for the 5k. Let's jump into the first tip. My first tip may sound a bit counterintuitive, but that is to slow down your easy runs and actually keep them easy. I'm just as guilty for trying to push the pace on those easier runs where there's really no need to. Not only are you just adding extra fatigue unnecessarily, it can actually be more enjoyable at times just to slow down, enjoy the run for what it is, and not compare yourself to what you see others doing on Strava. I mentioned this in one of my recent videos where I give you 7 tips for heavier runners like myself, but I've honestly found that my running has come on leaps and bounds, literally, ever since I slowed things down a bit. When I first started out, my easy run pace was around a 5-minute kilometre, but I couldn't understand why I wasn't getting any faster or fitter. When I slowed this down to between 5:30 and 6 minutes, things just started to click. I could run my easy runs further for longer, and when it came to doing something like a park run where I wanted to run quicker, I suddenly found myself able to run faster without it feeling as tough as it did before, even without doing any specific speed work. If there is one thing I've done in the last 6 months or so to run a faster park run, I would say it's slowing down and keeping that faster pace in reserve when it's actually needed. So yeah, dial your easy runs back a bit, and I think you'd be surprised at how beneficial it is when you come to run your next park run. Whilst we're talking about easy runs, my next tip is for you to incorporate some strides at the end to help your legs get used to turning over a bit faster. It's also some good practice to accelerate up to a faster pace, be it at the start of a park run or if you're wanting to speed up a bit out of a tight bend. Once you've almost finished your easy run, find a straight, flat stretch that is around 100 to 150 meters in length where you can do your strides. You want to run it close to max effort, so around 90% for very short bursts. As they are so short, you shouldn't find them overly fatiguing and they should be relatively easy to recover from, especially as you're doing them at the end of an easy run anyway. Just make sure you do them at the end and not at the very beginning. Strides help to increase your stride length as well as improve your overall running form, so I like to include them at the end of most runs where I don't have a particular session or intervals to do. If strides are new to you, you probably want to start out a bit conservative and maybe stick to around just 4 and then build up from there. Each stride will typically last for around 20 to 30 seconds, so I like to have a 40 to 30 second recovery after each to make it up to around a minute. You can then rinse and repeat until you reach the number of strides you're going for. Strides are great, so yeah, would definitely recommend including them in your training. Although it may not sound like it would save much time, being familiar with the parkrun course ahead of time can shave a few seconds off your time and potentially be the difference between setting a new PB or not. If you're a regular to parkrun, you probably already know your local course like the back of your hand, but if you're going to a new one for the first time, or maybe doing a bit of parkrun tourism, it's worth knowing a bit about the course ahead of time, like whether there are any sharp turns, how many laps are involved, or whether it's a simple out and back. Before you go to a new park run, it's worth looking at the website and checking out the map. The description of the course is usually pretty good as well, but just be aware that the course may change depending on the time of the year. One of the courses near me shows a particular route on the website, but this is just the summer course and there's quite a big change when it comes to running it in the winter months. And this is where you actually want to listen to the first timers briefing as well, as they'll give you a more detailed description of the day's course and provide some advice on things like where there's some tree routes to be aware of or where the terrain might change. It's also worth arriving that little bit earlier just to do a bit of a recce of the course as part of your warm-up. Now, it can be tempting to go to parkrun and try and set a new PB week after week. This may work at the beginning if you're new to running and are actually able to beat your previous time each week, but this will absolutely become harder as you become more experienced. The sort of race day effort that you end up needing to put in to set a new PB can be incredibly taxing on the body, especially if you try and run that pace every weekend. Doing so can be detrimental to all of your running, and you could find yourself going backwards or potentially even picking up an injury in a worst case scenario. Instead of trying for a new PB at every park run, my advice would be to pick one for the month which you're going to treat as your PB attempt and go all out for. For the others, treat them as a training run instead and enjoy parkrun for what it is and having the company of other like-minded people. One week you might want to treat it as a recovery run depending on what other training you've done that week, and then maybe on the next one you could pick up the pace a little bit and target your half marathon pace instead. Just try not to go full gas every single Saturday, as you'll likely find yourself to quickly plateau especially if you're more experienced, or end up going backwards and negatively affecting your upcoming training. By the way, if you're liking the video so far, it'd be great if you could give it a thumbs up, as it really does help out a lot. If you're focusing specifically on improving your parkrun time, it can be tempting to neglect the longer run of the week, but I think it's important to keep this in your schedule, as that is one of the sessions of the week that is most likely to help improve your aerobic capacity. When it comes to the 5k distance, although it is relatively short, especially compared to the likes of the half marathon and the full marathon, the majority of it will still fit in that aerobic zone, with just the last 100 meters or so where you do a sprint finish being anaerobic. So it makes sense to focus primarily on those slower aerobic miles designed to help improve your aerobic base, and this is where the long run comes in. Depending on your experience and goals, you may want to build up to between a 45-minute and 90-minute long run if you're focusing on improving your parkrun time as one of your main goals. Of course, the distance you run during this time will vary, but I think it's better to completely forget about the distance and just focus on your time on feet instead. If you're going for a particular distance, it may be tempting to speed up unnecessarily to try and get a good time, but that really isn't the intention of the long run. This type of run should be nice and easy at zone 2 heart rate. If you don't know your heart rate zones, just make sure to stay running at a pace where you could comfortably maintain a conversation. Some people have seen themselves set new parkrun PBs even during a big marathon training block. So making sure to keep a long run in your schedule and being disciplined to stay at your target pace can do wonders. Now, it's all too easy to go off guns blazing and try to get to the front of the pack when it hits 9 AM. You'll often see less experienced runners do this, only to find them slowing down not long after, as they simply went off too fast. I noticed this firsthand when I went down to my local park run with the intention of running at my 10k pace as part of a longer run at that weekend. I'll be honest and say it was a little disheartening, for lack of a better word, starting the run and then finding a good 20 or 30 people pass me within the first minute or so. But as I progressed around the park, I found myself gradually passing more and more people, including those that went off like an absolute bat out of hell at the start, yet I was still sticking to the exact same pace that I started at. I was quite pleased with myself in being disciplined enough to stick to my plan instead of saying screw it and going full send just to try and stick to the heels of those that went straight to the front at the start. So regardless of what you're doing parkrun for, be it for a particular time or to receive that elusive first finisher token, my advice would be to take it a little bit easier at the start and then finish strong by running negative splits. If you're not familiar with what negative splits are, it's basically running progressively faster as you work through the kilometers. So if you're aiming for a 20-minute 5k, for example, you could start off at a more manageable and comfortable 4:15 kilometer pace, but then finish running the last kilometer around 3:30, as you kept something in the tank for a strong finish. Negative splits are not only a bit easier on the body, as it allows you to ease into the effort more and get a feel for things, but you'll probably find yourself finishing with a quicker time anyway, so it really is a win-win. The final tip I have for you is to incorporate a warm-up and a cool-down, despite parkrun only being 5 kilometers. For me, if I'm driving to parkrun, I like to do a good 10 to 15 minutes of nice easy running beforehand, as well as a few strides just to turn the legs over a bit and get them used to running at a faster pace. During the briefing just before the start, I won't be standing at all still. I'll always keep myself moving, bouncing around a bit and doing a bit of active mobility like leg swings and ankle rolls. I find that if I just stand still, I can start to feel a little bit cold depending on the time of the year, and it feels like everything starts stiffening up a bit. Something you definitely don't want just before you start running. Now, I'll be honest and say I'm not as disciplined when it comes to doing a cool down, but I do try and make an effort and just do a nice easy kilometre or two after scanning my barcode, just to loosen everything up a bit and try and bring the heart rate down a bit more gradually, rather than having it drop suddenly when I slump down on the floor. I like to try and do some static stretching as well afterwards, as I find that I can start to feel stiff later in the day if I neglect to do it after a run. Something I do like to do if I'm heading to a park run that is a little further away from my home is to cycle there and back. As a triathlete myself, not only do I get a bit of extra bike volume in, but I find it to be an excellent way to warm up for parkrun. In fact, I find some of my best runs to be straight off the bike, so if I cycle to say Bideford Parkrun, I often don't need to do a short run as a warm-up and I can jump straight into it at 9 AM. I actually did this when I set a new 5k PB and went 18:22, so for me, cycling as warm-up definitely works. Whilst on the topic of a warm-up for parkrun, you should definitely go and watch this video here on screen where Harry Morgan from Jog On goes in depth on the importance of a warm-up and shows how he personally does it for parkrun. Not only can it benefit your time, but also your overall experience of the run, So head on over to Harry's channel and give that one a watch. Thank you so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it and you took something from it. Have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.